wrestling team. Oh, we're going to recognize them. I read the
bunch of
agenda.
Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. We'd like to begin the meeting. If you would all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. As we always do, I'm going to begin by reading our vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families in the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners, students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. At this point, I would like to call up our athletic director, Mr. McGinnis, to introduce our wonderful athletes that we have here tonight.
Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting us here this evening. This winter was an outstanding winter for our student athletes across the board. I think we set some great milestones. We increased our participation levels. We increased our overall GPA as an athletic program by receiving the gold standard for all of our sports for the winter, which are some of the most outstanding things you can do. And this evening, just as we did for the fall, we wanted to present to you our Cape Ann League championship teams. Those are the teams that won these seasonal championships, as well as state champions. So at this time, I would like to introduce you to two of our wrestling state champions. The first is Jared Durkin, who won our state championship at the 145-pound level. So Jared, if you can come on up. And the second is Anthony Ostrander, who won the state championship at the 152-pound level and went on to compete at the national levels this year. And he also was invited to the nationals. So now we'd also like to invite the wrestling team up. That was the Cape Ann League champions. They finished with an overall record of 19-3, and they were undefeated within the league. So first was Dylan Karpenko. Dylan? Chris Montes. Spiros Markopoulos. Jared Durkin again. Jared. Stephen Particelli. Jonathan Rolfe. Xander Rolfe. Jeremy Duford. Gus Kremen. Ethan Tremblay. And Anthony Ostrander again. And I'd like to introduce you to their two coaches, Coach Sean McGillicott and Coach Hayes, if they could come up as well. At this time, Ms. Sullivan and Mr. Forget, if you could possibly take time out to take a picture with the student athletes of this group before we move on to the next group, that would be great.
There's one sport I can't handle.
I do apologize. There are two more as they introduce themselves. Gracie Burnham, our manager. M. Meredith Fulford.
It's kind of a wide there.
All right, you could just squeeze in just a little more.
Yeah.
Don't worry. All right, Sean, a little more. Okay. Ready? There you go. Perfect. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you, wrestlers. Great job. The next student athlete we would like to introduce to you is also the last student athlete of the night. Her records speak for themselves. First of all, this was her 4th state title this year. As a junior, she has won 2 state titles each year back to back in the 50 free and the 100 free, both as as sophomores and as juniors. Over the last 3 years, she has broken the Division I North record for each event that she has swam in there, and her record has been broken by herself each time. It is now official. She is our first All-American swimmer in both events. Okay, I was just speaking to the coach, and that is now official. We'll be putting out there. She is Triton's first All-American in swimming, and it's easy to be the first one. It's hard to get that status, but she was also a member of the first swim program 5 years ago, so she helped establish that. So I would like to introduce to you the 2-time state champion, so she's going to get 2 certificates, Maggie Summit, Jr. We thank you very much, and we will be looking forward to presenting some new champions, hopefully, for the spring season at a later date with you. As just for a little plug for our softball team, they won again this evening. That puts them at, I believe it's 15-1 now. They're ranked in the top 25 in the state and top 5 in Division II North. So they have a couple of games left, so hopefully we'll be back with them and a couple of other student athletes in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. Again, congratulations to all our athletes. That is a tremendous achievement. We have awesome students here, as we all know. Moving on to chairperson's remarks. I just want to note the 40 Assets presentation was here at Triton last week, and it was a very exciting night. There were several of us who were there, and a lot of information, some of it a little bit surprising, which was good. I'm glad that it wasn't all what I expected anyway. And I think that there's information in there that could influence what we as a school committee should be doing, especially around school climate and school culture. There is another MASC Regional Schools meeting tomorrow night, which I will be attending. I just got the agenda today, and it's basically going to be looking at some of the amendments that Senator Tarr in particular is putting forth, but other senators as well, which I'm sure Narissa will get into more in the finance section of our program, or our agenda tonight. Also, we have a late approval for a trip to New York City for the visual and performing arts. Mr. Forget?
So just a quick explanation. I know we don't ever like to have you take action on something you get on such short notice, but this is planning approval. This was literally thought of on Monday. It was a little research and background on Tuesday, and it's coming to you tonight. The visual and performing arts, the music ensembles, various ensembles are playing pieces from Phantom of the Opera. And there was a discussion on Monday with one of the ensembles saying, hey, wouldn't it be fun to go see Phantom? And so it turned into well, that'd be great, to hey, we could do that. And so we are obviously in school till June 26th, so we're hoping there will be enough students around to take students. It's not an overnight trip, but it is out of state, so it does need your approval. So it's a day trip to New York City, bus ride down, show, meals. and a bus ride back. But I think it sounds like there's a good chunk of students who would be interested, and it's a great opportunity, and we wanted to seize that. So if you give planning approval tonight, we'll bring a report back to you for a final approval on June 13th.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to allow for planning purposes for the trip to New York City on June 28th?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Linda. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Maureen. Any discussion? Yes.
I just wanted to clarify, this is a trip that we funded by the individual students themselves?
Yep.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous. Great.
Thank you.
Lastly, I want to note that since the budget failed in 2 of our towns, I have received, as I'm sure other members have, a few emails regarding the budget. I want to remind people that tonight is not a public hearing on the budget, so I am not going to read those emails. However, I will make sure that they are included with the minutes and will be available at our next meeting. So moving on to oral communications from the public. Before I get into the nuts and bolts, I need to ask how many people here tonight would like to address the school committee? Not town officials. I'm not counting town officials in this. So 1, 2, 3, 4. What I'd like to do so that we, 5, okay, 5, as long as we have no more than 5. What I'd like to do so that we don't kind of tread onto dangerous territory of holding a public hearing, because it's not posted as such, this is just a regular school committee meeting, is that we will allow 5 people to speak for 3 minutes each. After that, each town official, or one from each town, will be given 3 minutes. So we'll have 24 minutes of comment on whatever you'd like to discuss. I am assuming that it is the budget. If you come up to address the school committee, please state your name. Debbie will be timing you for the 3 minutes. She will give you a 1-minute warning and then stop.
It's a skill.
It's a skill, that's for sure. We also, as a reminder, school committee will not be directly responding to what you have to say right now. However, I am pretty confident that in the discussion that we will be having later on the agenda regarding the budget, I'm sure the items that you raise will be discussed then. So, would the first person like to come up, and remember, please state your name.
Hi, my name is Carrie Day. I live in Rowley, Mass. Obviously, Mass. I'm here to voice support to fund the school budget at the highest level possible. As a Rowley resident and parent of 2 Pine Grove students, it was difficult to see the override fail, as nobody wants any Triton students' education to be negatively affected. Even though it failed, I feel our towns as a whole support the best educational experience we can offer them. We can't put next year's students at risk and say we will continue to work out our financial problems, because this year, like any, is a crucial year for current students at every grade level. In light of Newbury approving their budget, and in light of the Massachusetts Department of Revenue's reports that show Rowley's certified free cash at over $2 million and our stabilization fund at over $1 million, I urge the school committee to present a budget with as little cuts as possible, and I urge Rowley, if possible, to appropriate money from these funds to the school budget. The Department of Revenue recommends a town's certified free cash to be 3 to 5% of their operating budget, where Rowley's has been over 5% for the past 5 years, fiscal 17 being the highest of those years at 11.23%. These reports seem to show we are underestimating our revenues year after year, so it appears we have less money to spend in any given year. When in fact, for example, this fiscal 18 year, we have over $2 million of certified spendable money. I urge this money to go towards the school budget so we can continue to give our Triton kids the education they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Brian DePersia. I'm a Rowley resident. Commenting here tonight, not as a part of a committee or a campaign, but as a father, one with a child planning to start kindergarten in the fall. I find it extremely disheartening and disconcerting, to say the least, to know going into this next school year and beyond, there is such uncertainty as to the level of educational funding supported in this district. I know a significant shortfall is a responsibility of the state, and that must, absolutely without question, be brought to resolution. I urge the school committee to do their best, their very best, at settling this final budget. It is already understood that the original budget was a no-frills budget, nothing fancy, maintained the essentials, and did include cuts. This time around, make the tough cuts, the reductions, lean out where possible, but make a certain commitment to leave the core classroom unaffected. No teacher cuts, no aid cuts, no program cuts. Our kids deserve a Massachusetts education. So please be sure they get nothing less than your best effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm short. I have to turn this down. I'm Martha Tatro, and I have a senior in high school, and I have a freshman in high school. And I could probably go on and on about the amazing things that the Triton School District has done for my kids. And it started when my daughter was in kindergarten, and then it continued through two amazing principals who are still in the system. I want to read a list to you, and it's not long, but I think it's something that I wanted to make sure I read. Cal State Long Beach, San Diego State, Auburn University, the Coast Guard Academy, USC, Northeastern, Penn State, Alabama, Merrimack, Miami University, many schools in the UMass school system, Rensselaer Polytech, Dartmouth, Esthetician School, Cosmetology School, Work, the Armed Forces. Those are just some of the schools that students in this year's senior class are attending. There are countless others that many have already gone to, and they are in as we speak. In this district, we have teachers who went through our system and have come back to teach because they want to return the favor that their teachers provided in giving them the opportunity to give back. I know you are in a tough spot. I know that our towns and our districts have put you in a tough spot, and I beg of you, I implore that you think outside the box, you be creative in the budget that you create, in what you are able to continue to provide our kids. I know it's not hard, and I do want to say thank you. Many of you have done this before, and I feel terrible that you continue to be put in this situation. And I hope that in the future, we are able to move forward in our districts to provide you the support that you deserve, and our kids so deserve. So I want to end with thank you. I know it's difficult. I ask you to continue to think of the kids, and I appreciate all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm short too. Hi, I'm Christine Orpin. I have a son at NES in the 5th grade. So I agree that the state should be helping us out with this budget issue, but guess what? They're not this year. And now our community has to understand that's our shared responsibility to support our schools. And if they don't understand that, then you guys need to step in and make sure that our kids don't pay the consequences. Newbury voted yes and agreed to support the full budget. Newbury's voice should be represented in this budget as well. So much has been cut from our schools already, and our average class sizes, great teachers and aides are some of the few things we have left. If we start cutting these resources, we'll put the education that our kids have a legal right to at risk, and I'm afraid of what these cuts mean for my son. I remember a few months ago, an NES teacher came up here and talked about what it would be like for her if she had to teach a classroom with 30 kids or even a classroom with no aides. And she said she'd just have to teach one student, an average student, and hope everybody else caught up. That's no enrichment, no extra help. And honestly, it makes me wonder if I need to start thinking about putting my son in a different district. Cuts like these are going to have a lasting impact on our kids, and they compound over time, and we'll see more kids in the future who aren't getting into good schools or even able to find jobs in our own community. So I had a chance to talk with some kids from the elementary schools, and I asked them how they felt about it, because I think their voice is important too. And these are some things that they said. I just don't think it's very good. Teachers will spend more time trying to control the kids and less time teaching, and teachers are already frustrated with us. One kid said, that would suck. It would be bad for teachers and the kids. It would be a lot more work for teachers. And one kid said, there would be even more kids that need extra help, and what if that means I have to stay back? So our kids have some real concerns about this too. I also want to remind everyone that the teachers are usually the first ones to notice when a kid's in trouble academically and emotionally, and with fewer teachers in the classroom, fewer programs that help kids want to stay in school, more kids are going to fall through the cracks, and I hate to say this, but we know that those consequences can be tragic. Please don't approve a budget that cuts so many needed teachers and aides and programs. Remember, Newbury supported the full budget. Send the message to our community that it's our shared responsibility to support our schools. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stacy Hoggart. I live in Newbury. I have 2 children that attend school here in the Triton School District, and I consider many of their friends and families family of my own as well. So I speak on behalf of them as well as some of my friends from town who couldn't make it here today. First, I thank you, all of you here on this committee, for your continued support of our children. I know many of you have spent nights and weekends responding to questions and threads around the school budget. Thank you on behalf of our children, on behalf of our parents, on behalf of our teachers, and on behalf of our community. I think everyone agrees the children of our community are our future, and they deserve a great education. Most of us have come to see this, it's the state that has failed our kids, and I'm grateful to those who have started the grassroots effort to address it. Fundamentally, what we now need to do is agree on the right budget that will provide our children with the knowledge and skills they need to deserve to be successful in life. Smaller class sizes improve academic performance and allow teachers to recognize and address behavioral problems, including bullying. They provide students with a sense of belonging, boost morale, and encourage better cooperation. Our class sizes are average today around 19 to 20 students. Losing any number of teachers or class aides will impact our kids. One of my closest friends has a daughter with severe anxiety. She currently has an IA with her during the day and access to a special ed room when she needs it. This has been a tremendous support to her, but it's taken time to find this balance. How will any cuts impact her? My nephew is on the autism spectrum. Through early intervention and years of hard work, today he's doing well in an integrated class. How will these cuts impact him? Increased class size rooms and reduced one-on-one support could be enough to derail him and lose all of his gains. So many parents I talk to have children on IEPs or 504 plans. Each child needs some sort of individual support. How many will be at risk if we cut all these teachers and aides? And then what happens? As parents, our number one priority is to do what's best for our children, which may mean leaving the district. As a result, our school budget woes continue, our academics will degrade. Over time, our house values will decline and our community will slowly unravel. There was a social media post over the weekend from a mom asking for feedback on Newbury Elementary that caught my attention. Some of you may have seen it. One parent responded, "My children both choiced into Newbury Elementary. Fantastic school, super engaged principal and assistant principal, well-rounded curriculum, art, music, and theater." Another added, "My kids are learning empathy and compassion in ways I didn't expect. They really work on student sense of community too." The positive comments went on, and I felt lucky to have such a great school system. And that's just the beginning. In this school year alone, Salisbury Elementary staff received both the Massachusetts PTA Principal of the Year Award and Teacher of the Year Award. They were also named National PTA School of Excellence. Pine Grove had 4 students make it to the finals in the NASA Promotion and Research Challenge last month. Narissa has been awarded the Carol Woodbury Leader of the Year Award, which honors inspiring leaders who have made a difference in the school or community. This is our district. This is who we are. This is who we want to continue to be. I know it's a difficult decision, but we ask you to put forth the best budget we can to allow our children to allow our community to continue to be great and to set our children up for success. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to town officials, do we have anybody here from Newbury first? Rowley.
Larry White, Rowley. In December 2017, the Rowley Board of Selectmen sent a letter committing Rowley to the $200,000 increase in the fiscal 19 Triton budget. In budget development, Rowley held to this commitment and sent to the town a budget with the $200,000 increase in the basic budget and, as requested by some town citizens, an override provision to fund the full Triton budget. The basic budget with the $200,000 increase was unanimously approved by the town at its town meeting. The override provision was defeated in the May 8th ballot question by over 60% of the Rowley voters. Rowley has not won the lottery nor discovered a pot of gold on town property. Our budget remains the same. We will honor the $200,000 increase. We charge Triton to honor the voices of the Rowley voters and those of Salisbury as well, who also defeated an override, and submit a budget that is within or below the guidelines set by the voters of Rowley and Salisbury. Listen to the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Salisbury?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, for this opportunity to speak. I have to go the opposite direction with the mic. I provided copies of my remarks for members of the committee and the superintendent. I'll try to keep to the 3 minutes, although I timed myself at 3 minutes and 27 seconds. My name is Neil Harrington. I'm the town manager in Salisbury, and I've been involved in municipal government for more than 25 years. So I'm familiar with the push and pull that comes with trying to prepare a reasonable budget for a municipality and a school district. I served for 8 years as chairman of the school committee in Salem when I was the mayor. When funding is plentiful, budget decisions are easy, and everyone in a decision-making capacity can look like a hero to his or her constituency. But when funding is tight and unexpected expenses arise, or in this case, the state does not fulfill its commitments, good decision-making is harder to find. As you know, a city or town has to provide a myriad of services to its citizens: school system, fire and police protection, services for the elderly, libraries, financial management, planning, building and health, public works, etc. To each citizen, the relative importance of each of these services depends on how often they use or expect these services to be available to them and what their expectations are for the quality of these services. Thus, balance is the key to responsible budgeting. Sadly, in my opinion, in this school year's school budget cycle, the concept of balance seems to have been lost among those who are insisting that their priority should trump everyone else's in town, no matter what. Demographically, Salisbury is on the lower end of the scale in terms of median family income and ability to pay higher taxes. However, in the past 5 years alone, even though Salisbury's assessment for Triton has risen over $1.8 million, or 4% a year, despite the constraints of Proposition 2.5, Salisbury has consistently supported every single budget request that's been placed before it. No one can legitimately say that Salisbury does not adequately support its schools. And yet, the school committee, with all due respect, believed it was defensible to ask for double the 4% increase that Salisbury has consistently supported for Triton over the last 5 years. This insular and ill-considered decision was rightly rejected by the taxpayers in Salisbury as exorbitant. To give you some perspective on how the voters in Salisbury think, let me remind you that they overwhelmingly supported 2 overrides in the past 3 years, one for a new police station, one for a new library. These 2 mill buildings are great assets to the community and are also a source of pride to our citizens. 8 days ago, however, the override for the request in Triton increased failed. What does this mean? It means that Salisbury taxpayers were willing to vote for an increase in their own taxes for the next 20 years to build a new police station and a new library, but not to support an 8% increase in their assessment for Triton for 1 year. The message should be clear. The Triton request was unreasonable. There is no other polite way to characterize the original vote. I'm almost finished. So I would respectfully suggest the school committee step back and reevaluate its budget proposal. I understand the superintendent has been working on 1 or more possible recommendations, not knowing what he might propose before I walked in here tonight. I respectfully suggest you consider balancing what you want under the best of circumstances with what the towns tell you they can reasonably afford under the current circumstances. So, what does this mean? I would suggest, based on our most recent history, that Salisbury would be willing to support a 4% increase in our budget for next year for Triton, which would mean an increase of about $450,000. There will be some pain involved for both the town and the school district at this number, but at least the pain will be shared. If, on the other hand, the new Triton budget increase for Salisbury is not in line with this number, the pain will be disproportionately imposed on other town services, which is ultimately a disservice to the taxpayers of Salisbury. I respect the fact that you have a very difficult decision to make, but as I stated at the beginning, good decision-making is harder to find when resources are scarce and legitimate competing interests are viable for the same tax dollars. I hope you look at the current dilemma in a balanced manner and make a fair and equitable decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all the speakers tonight. As I said, a lot of what you've raised tonight, I'm sure will be addressed when we discuss the budget shortly. Moving on to the school committee reorganization, do we have a motion to appoint a chairperson? I would like to nominate Narissa.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? First, I should ask any other nominations. Good. All in favor? Unanimous. Congratulations, Narissa. It's all yours. Yeah, I don't care.
Thank you, Dina, and thank you to the board for your support, because that means a lot, especially in tough times. Our next item of business is to appoint the vice chairperson. Do I have a motion to appoint, or a motion to nominate a vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Deb Choate for vice chairperson.
I'll second.
Any other nominations? I'd like to nominate Maureen Heffernan for vice chair. And here's where I run into procedural question, because I've never done this in a meeting before, so I'll defer to you, Dina, on what.
You take each vote
Separately.
separately and majority wins.
Okay. So all in favor of Deb Choate for vice chairperson? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, I think. Yeah, 4. And all in favor of Maureen Heffernan for vice chairperson? Okay. And I would be the tiebreaker vote, so it would be Maureen Heffernan for vice chair. I need a motion to nominate a secretary.
I'd make a motion to nominate Dina Sullivan for secretary.
I'll second.
Any other nominations? All right. All in favor? Looks like we have a unanimous vote. All right. And that will move us on to our next item of business. I know we're going to shift around the agenda a little bit, but I think we're going to finish B and C, is my understanding, in this item and then at the recommendation of the superintendent, we're going to skip to general action items, which is number 11.
Yes, I think given the audience and the discussion on the budget, it makes sense to bring the action items to the front. But I would like to ask Michelle to review
Hang on.
item. So you're there. Oh, you're doing subcommittee membership.
Yeah, I'm going to do subcommittee
Sorry.
membership first. I just wanted to put it out there as what comes next.
Gotcha.
So, subcommittee membership, given that it's a new year, we have to redo the subcommittees. The vote will be, or the reorganization will be official at the June 13th meeting, but I'd ask people to get their first, second, and third choice on where they'd like to serve in to be by next Wednesday, please, so that I can start making those lists. School committee calendar is in your packet, page 13. Can I get a motion to confirm the schedule of the school committee meetings for 2018 and 2019?
I'll make a motion to accept the calendar as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? It's a unanimous vote. All right. And we are going to move to item 11, general action items. You'll find it on the last page of the agenda, top item. And I will ask Michelle Cresta. Oh,
Can I adjust that? Sorry.
oh,
Catching up, doing too many things at once. Actually, Olivia Valley is here. If we can do the student report next. She was actually late because it's field hockey, correct? Lacrosse, sorry. So she was on the field at the start of the meeting and has raced back, but she is here, so I would love to have the student report.
Sorry.
Absolutely.
April vacation lasted from the 15th to the 21st, and many juniors used their vacation time to start planning for their future, traveling in and out of state to tour possible colleges. Spring sports are underway, and now that the snow has melted, teams like boys and girls lacrosse and track are excited to use the turf in the new stadium. The high-powered lights help to extend practices even after the sun has gone down, and student athletes are working hard to uphold the school standards of camaraderie and sportsmanship. Triton Student Council attended the Northeastern Massachusetts Association of Student Councils Leadership Conference at Kowloon's in Saugus. Around 20 of our students took the bus there on Thursday, the 26th of April, and participated in leadership strengthening activities. We listened to the speeches of candidates from other schools and voted for the new president, vice president, and secretary of NEMAS for the upcoming 2018 to 2019 school year. Student Council and their NEMAS delegates hope to continue attending these events in the future. Elections were also held for Triton Student Council, as the seniors will only have one more meeting before they graduate. New e-board members were elected for the 2018 to 2019 school year, including historian Grace Poster, secretary Farah Gabriel, publicity officer Sophie Proctor, vice president Grace McClellan, and president Lily Fulford. The newly elected board is looking forward to their time next year and are already planning for the future of Triton. Thank you, and please ask any questions.
barring any questions, I'd like to thank you for presenting your report.
Thanks for racing back, Olivia. So now we're on to general action items. Okay. So, Michelle.
Okay, thank you. In the budget packet on page 98, it's actually one of the very last pages in your packet, if not the last page of the original packet. I am making a request that the school committee appropriate our E&D funds, also known as free cash when you're talking about a town or a municipality. E&D is the same terminology, but for a regional school district. For fiscal 18, which we have about 6 weeks remaining, we are running extremely tight. Certain areas we have had higher than anticipated expenses. In other areas, we actually have a little bit of excess funds. But in terms to balance the budget and close it out, we have to end in a position where we do not have a deficit. In the area of special education, in terms of contract services, which is mostly therapies and outside outplacement tuitions, the costs have been higher than we budgeted for last fall, or actually last spring. So at this point, we currently have $299,077 in our E&D fund. This is the total amount that was certified by the Department of Revenue for our FY17. And I would like to request that the school committee appropriate that full amount towards special education costs in our current FY18 budget as a stopgap measure. I do not anticipate that we're going to need this full amount of the $299,077, but I do anticipate that we will need a portion of it. So anything that is remaining as of June 30th will close out and go back into our E&D, which will be then certified again as of June 30th for this coming year. And there is a motion, I don't know, excellent, that I would request the school committee make to allow this action.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2018 amended operating budget in the amount of $39,332,103, which includes the additional appropriation of excess and deficiency funds in the amount of $299,077. The additional appropriation shall be allocated to the special education contract services in the amount of $175,000 and to the special education tuitions in the amount of $124,077.
A second? Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous vote. If we could move on to the fiscal year 2019 operating budget.
So you have before you an updated recommendation from me on the fiscal 19 budget. Again, I don't need to rehash. We all know what has transpired. We certainly heard views on next steps that you should take as a committee tonight from those who have spoken. I know you've heard from folks within the towns. So tonight I'm recommending to you some cuts to make. As several people have said, there's no cuts we can make at this point that are not impacting in some way. There's been discussion in the papers on Facebook in regards to how the district can operate like a business and just trimming certain sections of the budget by a percentage and having managers and principals do that. The reality is the money that is at the principal's discretion is incredibly limited now. The reality is that it's supplies and materials money, and besides those lines, the 2400 series, as you know, in the budget, there really isn't a whole lot that we have to control at the school level besides people. The balance of those costs, the operational costs, are budgeted at the district level. And we've had discussions for years about how we're controlling costs. We've made lists of all the cuts that we've made, the FTEs, but the reality remains we do continue to need to make cuts. So regardless of the side, if you will, that we land on, the reality is the voters spoke, and so we do need to take some action to respond accordingly. That's your job to decide what accordingly looks like. But what you have before you tonight is my recommendation. To make it clear, I am recommending the top box that's in yellow as the cuts that I am recommending to you. The box at the bottom, which I'll go through all of these, are reductions that we have looked at, we've considered, we've talked about. These are discussions that we've been having since January when this budget process began, and quite honestly before that, but very formally since January when this process began. So just to take you through the recommendations that I am making to you, at the top box, we are anticipating an additional $175,000 in state revenues. That assumption is based upon 85% reimbursement for transportation, and that is an additional $10 per pupil on Chapter 70 aid. Those who are following any of the work that the Support Mass Regional Schools group is doing, and Narissa is obviously keeping this committee involved in that process, watching the amendments, watching the action currently in the Senate. There are certainly several amendments that are pertinent to us that we are supporting in any way that we can. And there are amendments for upping the minimum aid to $40, $50, $100 per pupil. And there are amendments at both 85 and 100% transportation reimbursement. So there is certainly more motion than I've ever seen. There's more action and more momentum, I think is the word I'm looking for, at the state level than I certainly have seen in my 13 years in this position. So we're hopeful. We're making some assumptions here. And obviously, if those assumptions aren't true, then that's something we'll have to adjust moving forward and suggest reductions. But I'm to the point where I believe we have to take a risk here and make an assumption. Again, if we make an assumption that's too low on state revenue and we don't receive that revenue, it can't be spent because it's above the appropriation. So if we aim higher and it comes in lower, we can adjust our spending accordingly. If we aim low and it comes in higher, then that would filter through to excess and deficiency. Again, you just saw that we allocated the entire balance, so that technically at this point we have zero. As Michelle said, likely we hope the majority of that will filter through and recertify. But coming into the end of a year with the uncertainty that we have, that balance is down to zero. So, so we have to protect ourselves and make sure that we have the funds necessary. So those assumptions are a little bit aggressive, but we believe they could come in higher, quite honestly. And if that happens, excellent. That starts to replenish our E&D. But if not, we are in a position then to be able to make cuts as we would need to. The next line is building custodians. This represents a half-time custodian in each elementary school. The thinking behind this is that we certainly cannot ask any more of our custodians as far as the work they do and the time that they're scheduled. There are formulas set for number of people per square footage that it's reasonable to expect, and we're already within those or below those calculations. This takes us well below, so there is absolutely an impact. I gave an example here, whether it plays out exactly this way, but every night we do the halls, we do the bathrooms, we do the trash. Maybe we can only vacuum classrooms every other night. Again, I don't know that that's the way it will play out, but there has to be a change in expectation about what these individuals can do on a nightly basis. Again, focusing everything we can to make sure that class sizes are not impacted. That is the target, and the entirety of these reductions that I certainly want to thank the principals who are here tonight and the entire leadership team, the hours and hours and hours that we've reviewed this. There's no good answers. There's no place left without cutting people. The next line is the majority of the cuts. It's a big price tag, and it's something that we have been talking about for months. This is one that we have reviewed extensively. We've been reviewing this ongoing year over year. We did add a special education teacher at both Pine Grove and at Salisbury in this budget. So the budget as finalized does include an additional special education teacher at both those schools. We did add a special education teacher back at Newbury last year. So the thinking with this reduction is that we would change the delivery and how we support students. The important message here is that this does not take us out of compliance. We believe that although the structure we have in place is the best in meeting needs for our students, maybe it goes slightly beyond what we're absolutely required at a minimum. So this moves us back towards what we're required at a minimum. The numbers are roughly three at each elementary in the high school and 2 at the middle school. That's the way the numbers that we put them on paper. We've gone back and forth, and I know the principals we have talked this discussion around and around, and we believe we can make this work. Will there be a change in the way we support? Unequivocally, yes. But we believe that we can make this work. It will not be as good as it is now. We will, again, the most important piece is we believe we will be in compliance. It's not where we want to be, but we believe we will be in compliance. At the high school, this is actually a new cut that you have not seen previously. And so I don't want to get into a big discussion about data, but you have around the table. Actually, Linda asked the question, and it's a great question, and it's a good piece of data to actually demonstrate why this recommendation is here. The data that you have in front of you, and I apologize, it's not copies for the audience, I don't believe, but the data shows the beginning of year iReady data for 8th graders and mid-year. We're about to do soon, right? End of May, beginning of June. We'll do spring assessment data. Can we do those assessments beginning of year, mid-year, and end of year? At the beginning of the year, 52 students were more than 2 grade levels below. Mid-year, there were 27 students. The model is working in the middle school. We have, that's the reading specialist at the middle school and the high school are newer positions. At the elementary level, we've been talking about this for a decade plus, and the structure is in place with the school day, with the schedules that work to support students, and we see the impacts. At the middle school, it was a big change. We've talked about that over the last few years. It's a big change in culture and in expectations and the way students are supported in classrooms. But we can see through this data, one piece of data, and again, I didn't want to turn this into a discussion about data, but it shows it's working at the middle school. We have a long way to go, and I know that we're pleased with the progress this year, and we anticipate that we'll see the continued progress. At the high school, the data doesn't look as good, and I resisted putting it in front of you tonight because I don't want the data to point to one person, because that's not fair. Because the reality is the structure at the high school doesn't exist in a way that supports that type of intervention with a class structure, the way it's scheduled into the day, departments, special education department, just the layout overall of the structure of a high school day and a high school atmosphere. We haven't figured that out. I think I would say, and I would speak for everyone, we believe it could work, but we're at this point, and I believe the reading specialists would agree, we're not able to maximize the use of that position and get the impact that we would like to see out of that. So given that fact and where we are tonight, and the fact that as we go through every single dollar we spend, we're saying, are we able to say unequivocally we are seeing significant impact from that dollar? I can't say yes to that. We can't say yes to that. So we're suggesting that is a reduction. Obviously, there's shifts and bumps that don't yield a larger savings, but those savings would materialize over the coming years. For transportation, there's a $15,000 savings. We had talked about this during the budget process. We're a little further, or the beginning of the budget process, I should say, about leasing 2 vans. And in leasing those vans, primarily for athletics and/or our vocational 18 to 22-year-old student program, having the teacher pay them a stipend, we'd have to figure out exactly what the amount is. But rather than paying what's a van cost? $218 a day to transport 3 students to a vocational placement at Market Basket, as an example. Rather than paying $218, we would pay someone the $50, or I'm making this up, the number, $40, $50, we have to figure that out, for the staff person to drive those few students over. We figured out as long as we are not transporting students to and from home, that is not student transportation. So then we would have to be a licensed student transportation provider and all those things. So this is the way schools do it. Sports teams, we have smaller sports teams that don't need a 77-passenger bus. So this provides a much more cost-effective way. We're starting with 2 leases. That's the plan. The hope is that we can expand this maybe in the future, but we believe there is some significant savings there, hopefully more as the years go on. For athletics, recommending a $13,000 reduction. In speaking with Sean, the athletic director, I can't say specifically what that will be. We had proposed the removal of assistant coaches, period, in the initial budget, and there was concern about the safety. I think there are some teams where we could cut an assistant coach that have been added in the last year or two, and with numbers, we could remove 1 or 2. Blanket saying that there are no assistant coaches is a concern. So this doesn't remove assistant coaches as a blanket rule. There may be 1 or 2 or 3 that are not replaced. But it's more, maybe 1 scrimmage less, maybe, I'm not going to come up with our examples, but 1 less detail for a game. So again, over a $650,000 spend-ish ballpark on athletics. That would be a $13,000. There is already a $7,000 reduction in the budget that you approved. So this in total would be roughly a $20,000 decrease in spending on athletics. Increased fee collections. We have an elementary instrumental program. We charge $100 per student. We have been inconsistent in the collection of fees, mostly because we want to promote that and make sure that we have every student that wants the opportunity to participate in grades 4 through 6 and playing an instrument, that money not be a roadblock. So this proposal here is we need to be more deliberate in the fee collections, make sure that comes into our office and take that off. That's not the teacher's responsibility, but that we collect that money. Again, I don't ever like fees being the answer, but that's more or less fulfilling a promise that we made to charge those fees. And then there's various stipend positions. There's science support, math support. As we move along in our implementation, we're clearly further with math than we are with science K through 8. And so we believe that we can pull those stipends back. Is it ideal? Absolutely not. We could use 5 times that with additional support and additional PD, and that would be a significant benefit. But again, we believe we can make that work. Explorations, to confirm, that's actually coordination. That's not explorations, the programming. So that actually removes the explorations, the district coordinator for the explorations program. So that's something that gets taken on more to the 2 women to my right, and then working with the coordinators in each of the elementary schools and the middle school to coordinate those programs. The same is true with Kids Club. We're removing the district level coordinator and working with the site-based coordinators, but again, there isn't general fund savings because that's a fee-based program. And then the final one is homeless coordination, and that doesn't mean we're not coordinating homeless services for students. There's some money that we were paying out of the local general fund, and so we're making sure that any services we do provide and coordinate is coming through the McKinney-Vento grant. So let me stop there. $664,396. That is my recommendation to you this evening as far as cuts. I do want to explain to you the additional cuts on the bottom. I'm happy to go through those, or if it's helpful to answer questions about the top now, whatever you believe is more helpful.
My preference would be to break it up if we can, just to take it in chunks that are doable. So I'll open it to discussion for the top yellow box. Dina?
Couple of comments and a few questions, if you'll indulge me. Building custodians. I remember when my kids were in elementary school, we had a similar situation, only we had to make mid-year cuts. Bear in mind, my kids are now 25 and 27. And it was awful. It does impact students. And I think the value of having a clean classroom cannot be overstated. I have a question on transportation. How does that impact insurance? Is the driver the one that's providing the insurance? Is the district?
Can I answer that?
Yes, I have looked into the insurance aspect. The district would be providing the insurance. The insurance on the vehicles is a nominal amount, I think in the ballpark about $1,500 a year, and the drivers would be covered under our blanket policy. So there would not be a substantial increase, and that has been included into the savings calculation.
And the last question, with the placement of students in classrooms, as far as the instructional aides go, I'm sure that the principals will do their level best to still make balanced classrooms, but I still have concerns about that. If our biggest expense outside of personnel is sped costs, I think in the long run, we're going to be causing more. Not only with reading, which, like Linda pointed out, with the information she asked for, but, we had a discussion early in the budget process about a special program that Dave thought would be worthwhile, which this was the second year it was before us, and again, we can't fund it. I expect next year we're going to see something similar. So I have great reservations about that, too.
If I could just respond and say me too. I mean, the reality is when we have to balance classroom sizes with additional supports. Again, the discussion around the table is the larger the class size gets, the harder it is to support those students. So what this would mean, for an example, if we were placing students for various interventions, whether it's students on with specialized services or receiving intervention, Title I services at Salisbury, if we are providing those services spread across four classes at a grade level, maybe we need to put those students into 2 or 3 classes so that we can support them with fewer individuals, fewer educators, whether paraprofessionals, IAs, classroom educator specialists. Again, not ideal, impactful, absolutely. But again, in the grand discussion, it was a matter of less impact.
We have children who are homeless, who living in poverty, who live with trauma, depression, anxiety. Our teachers are amazing across the district to try and help these children. That the foundation starts at the elementary level. And you need these IAs to help, because even before these children can start learning, that these IAs and teachers need to make sure the social emotional needs are met. So to cut 14 IAs across the district, I think is going to be just, in fact, I'm going to ask later for the data of not having the late buses. How not having late buses has probably caused some of our students to not be able to stay after school. I just think we need to look at what is in the best interest of our students.
I have a comment about what you just said, moving more kids to fewer classrooms.
Yep.
To have fewer instructional assistants. I've worked that model. If you put more kids in a classroom with one instructional aide, it's not good. How many are you trying to put into a classroom? If you put more than 3 or 4, it's awful. Is that what you're going to do?
I don't have those specific numbers, no.
So you really don't know how you're going to be placing the kids into what kind of classrooms and how many aides you're going to have? I mean, would you put 5 or 6 in a classroom with an aide? 5 or 6 special ed kids?
Absolutely, depending on the level of need, absolutely.
Ryan, that's contraindicated, very bad, I think. I've worked the model. It never works.
Yeah.
You need no more than 3 or 4 in a regular classroom. Is that something you've talked about?
Over and over and over. The reality is when we start going to cutting classroom teachers, there's only, and you have that down here, 2 classrooms in the district. It's grade 2 at both Salisbury and Newbury, where we could talk about making a cut of a teacher and still landing with lower numbers. Again, I would say 23 at grade 2 is a very different animal than 23 at grade 6. And I would say 23 at Salisbury is a very different thing than at 23 at Newbury. But if you look at the rest, all the other class sizes, all the other grade levels, you quickly, just based on numbers, it's just pure numbers, we're quickly into the upper 20s, and there's a few that end up in the low 30s. So it's just, I didn't know where else to go. I mean, certainly anyone else is free to jump in here. If the principals want to jump in, I don't know where else to go.
I just want to make one
Disagree with
comment. A couple of years ago, when we were reviewing the budget, I asked about instructional assistants. I didn't get much hate mail, but I did ask about it. And you convinced me that they were all necessary. We needed it to provide the quality. We were shortchanging the kids if we didn't have this amount of instructional aides. And then all of a sudden we come and we can lose 14 and maybe have 5 or 6 kids in a regular class, 5 or 6 special ed kids in a regular classroom with 1 aide. You're telling me that's a possibility?
A possibility, yes. Will that be in every classroom? I can't answer that. We have to go through the class placement process, but the discussion has been back and forth with the principals, how many, looking at the support, looking at special education teachers and other supports, going back and forth, how could we support differently? So maybe that wasn't the right example to use, but is that a possibility? Absolutely. Can I also jump in terms of
Help
DIA
me.
placements? I mean, I think in terms of kids with behavioral concerns and significant behavioral concerns, we're not talking about placing 4 or 5 kids with significant emotional disabilities in one classroom, but there could be a group of kids who might have, say, a similar learning disability and reading, that need reading support that would be better served in one classroom rather than spreading them out through 4 or 5. And then there's also, what's also happened is because of some of the placement changes, where at least 3 of the IAs that are on that list are being reduced because of change in placements of students. So we've lost some. I mean, again, that's why our out-of-district budget has increased, but those kids had one-to-one aides with them. So those IAs will no longer be needed for those students because they're not going to be here. So at least 3 to 4 are really being reduced because their student is not going to be in the school.
So you're going to cut 11.
I mean,
Is that what
and
you're
honestly,
saying?
that just happened in the last 2 weeks. So at least 3 or 4, again, are just from the students being outplaced. So that position, if a student has a one-to-one IA, they have to have a one-to-one IA. But if they go to another placement, then that is an automatic reduction. So at least 3 or 4 are in that number are part of that automatic reduction. The others are, I know also at the middle and high school, some of the kids transitioning into the 18 to 22 program, that program is getting smaller for the moment. Just this year, we have kids coming up from behind. So they'll likely, there's ways to look at being more efficient. And I think just from speaking to other towns and directors, we have more IAs than probably most districts of our size, from when I asked other districts to compare the number of IAs we have. And again, there's 2 different types. There's one with the severe student with autism or medical needs. Those are, obviously, we're not going to look at those. It would be more if there's students with a learning disability or that have, similar issues. So again, we're not talking about placing 4 or 5 kids with social emotional issues in one classroom. So again, it's not ideal, but I think the goal was to really try to protect class sizes and teachers. So.
Any other discussion on the top yellow box? Ina?
I'd like to change this focus for just a minute. It relates to, I believe it was the first speaker who spoke tonight about Raleigh's contribution to the budget and what they said that they could support. I went on that same website, it's DOR, and I was very discouraged because we have been told time and time again. First of all, I want to say kudos to the towns for putting money in free cash and stabilization, because that's what we should be doing, should be saving for a rainy day. But you just heard less than a half hour ago, Triton has now no rainy day fund. We just voted to possibly use our entire E&D. It's at risk. And if we don't use it, yes, it goes back into our E&D, but we have no idea what that amount is. Just like the towns should have 1 to 3%, so should we. We don't. I asked the superintendent, I'll ask people to pass this around after looking at this. This shows what Triton has done from 2007 budget to 2018, what percentage our E&D is of our budget. And there should be, I'm assuming, extra copies for audience members too. I'm not trying to pick on one town. I am trying to clarify why I am upset about having to make any more cuts to this budget. Even when we voted the final budget, I had reservations because we are cut to the bone. In fact, we are sucking marrow now, as I said to the superintendent earlier. We are absolutely destroying the education in our district. And I don't think that's what we want. I understand that there are other draws on the town's money, and it's not the town's fault that we're in this situation. It's not Triton's fault we're in this situation. I do think the state has a large part to play in that, but we are working towards remedying that. And it's not like this year is the first year we've ever done anything about it. Thankfully, Narissa and her group has gained great traction this year. But I think it stemmed from having the state auditor's report and having her present here and connecting with other people across the state. So there is great interest in this, and they're finally hearing us, especially our delegation. Senator Tarr is really, he's got several amendments pending now, which I know, like I said before, I know Narissa will address shortly. But as we look at that, if everybody has that paper, Michelle, you have the same copy?
Yes.
If you don't mind going through that and kind of just giving us a brief overlook of what we're looking at?
The paper before you just details the certified excess and deficiency, or E&D, figures from fiscal 2007 through fiscal 2018. As Dina mentioned, the DOR recommends for municipalities and districts that this E&D or free cash figure in the municipal world remain between 3 and 5% of the operating budget. As you can see from this history, our FY 2007 was at $446,000, which represented approximately 1.4% of our budget. And over the years, it has decreased. And then we hit a high in fiscal 2014 and 15, where we exceeded 2% of our budget. We were in the ballpark of the $700,000 to $800,000 range. It has steadily decreased from that time in 2014, 2015, and the last couple of years was $598,000. Fiscal 17 was $341,000, which we used all but $100,000 in last year's budget. And this year, currently for fiscal 18, we just approved, or the school committee just approved, the use of $299,000 to offset our FY 18 budget. Typically, in most recent years, we have actually used about $100,000 or more to be put aside towards our operating budget to reduce the assessment. We were not able to do that this year due to the foreseen use of this fund. So ideally, part of the appropriation that we voted earlier this evening, or you guys voted earlier this evening, of the $299 will come back into our free cash for next year, but I do not expect that we're going to exceed the $300,000 mark again. We don't see any significant revenues on the horizon that we are closing the year with, nor any surplus expenditure funds available.
Thank you. And just indulge me for another 30 seconds. I wish there were copies of all of this, but this is a good visual. If you can see this, this is what was referred to before. These 3 years here is Rowley's free cash. This is Salisbury's. They've been using their free cash to support the budget. This is Newberry's. So I'm a little upset that I have great respect for Mr. Harrington, but with all due respect, what we did was not irresponsible, putting forth the budget that we did. What's irresponsible is this budget.
Narissa, can I make a comment?
Tina?
I want to make a few comments and then ask a question. I want to thank everyone on the committee, everyone that came tonight, Narissa especially, for spearheading Support Mass Regional Schools and the We Are Triton people. I really do believe that people are our greatest assets, and I think we're very fortunate overall to live in a community with these 3 towns where we have some really wonderful people, especially newcomers coming in to the district. I got a lot of phone calls and a lot of nervous parents after the overrides passed. My kids are 3 and 2. They have a few more years until they enter into the school system, and we're really looking forward to that. But there are already people that are afraid and not sure if they're going to send their kids or they're going to have to move because they can't afford to go to private schools, and this is really scary for them. So another thing, too, that has really sat with me, especially being one of the newer members to the committee, and Dina has already said it many times before, and it's always stuck with me, and to echo off what she just said, is that we've never put forward and passed an adequate
budget. And I think one of the things that we had talked about early in the year, especially in our workshops, in terms of talking about policy and advocacy and how the schools and the towns can work together as a team. And I think that was really one of our goals this year and that we were hoping for during the budget process that I was really excited about, because I felt through the district communication meetings and even with Rally sending the letter to us, and I think the school committee communicating, the rhetoric back and forth has still been pitting the towns against the schools. And it's so unfortunate, and it's really upsetting to me, because I think at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want the same thing. It doesn't matter what age, what demographic. I do believe that we want the same thing, and everyone has the right to a quality education. And what the school committee did, and what made me upset, and just reading through the forums, and Narissa did such an amazing job, I think, putting out the facts, is that our job as a school committee is to put forth an adequate budget. And then through the democratic process, the towns can decide what they want to do, and the taxpayers can decide if they want to vote yes or no. That's totally fine. So, but a lot of the things that have been said have almost made it like the school committee and the administration, which I have to say, I think we're really lucky right now with our administration, with the people that are on this committee and other people that are supporting the district. We have an award-winning PTA, that now is the time that we have the momentum to Triton is good, we can make it great. So I think it's just unfortunate, and I feel like we're taking a step back after working so hard. But I know one of the concerns that I think a lot of younger parents have that aren't as knowledgeable about the way things work because their kids aren't in the school system yet is, what can we do to help? So with the reduction of the IAs, I'm not sure how it works in terms of, can the schools go back, and are there programs or processes in place where each individual school can reach out to parent volunteers that are Corey to come in and at least support the teachers, so then the teachers can focus on the students that might need more help, and that the parents can help. I remember growing up having, classroom parents, and I'm sure that's something that's already now, but obviously if we don't have the money to do it, I feel like we have a lot of amazing people in this community that are willing to step up and serve their time. So is that a solution that we can use for now, or how creative can we get to sort of fill the gaps of resources that we don't have the money to pay for?
That's a good question. I would say to that, an instructional assistant is a trained educator.
Right.
They're not a licensed educator. There are some, I take that back. Role does not require a license. There are many IAs, paraprofessionals, some districts call them, who have degrees in education, whether they're searching for a job, used to be a teacher, want that schedule. But the role of an IA is not something that I think we could easily replicate with a volunteer position. It's not someone coming in to just support a classroom teacher. By and large, it's directly supporting students. It's working with the special education liaison in implementing an IEP to help differentiate, to help modify the curriculum, which is what is required of an IEP. So provide those accommodations and modifications. So I would say at face value, is there a possibility or an opportunity where volunteers could be helpful? I imagine so, but I would not say that a parent volunteer without, again,
Right.
if they want to spend 180 days, 7 days, 180 days a year
Right,
and
it's
7
not a
hours a
direct
day,
replacement
that would
of
be
it.
wonderful. But, generally parent volunteers are working and come in an hour here and there, and we can always use that help. But it's a much more trained, trained educator with a very specific purpose. So I would say at face value, no, that would not be a quick solution, no.
Thank you.
Dan?
So this is clearly between a rock and a hard place. Budget. I just want to take a slightly different tone, however, and say that if indeed, given that the override didn't pass in 2 towns, and we are charged by law to pass a balanced budget with revenues balanced with spending, and if the priority is to continue the great work that this district is doing, to continue the momentum, and to protect critical services and teaching positions, then this does that. And we are indeed lucky to have the leadership that we have sitting across from us, because that's the one chance we have to protect the gains that we've made and to continue to move forward. But even this appears going to be a hard swallow for these towns. So I think, again, I mentioned between a rock and a hard place, that's essentially where we find ourselves. But I think if indeed what our goal was to try to protect critical services and protect the most important teaching positions and vital programs, that this does that. So we have to work to get this done, beginning tonight.
Paul?
So one of my concerns, Brian, is that in general government budgets, when the cuts come, they come to the social services, and they affect the people who have the least amount of voice. And one of the concerns I have about the yellow box at the top, I guess Stacy Hoddard was the fifth speaker. I don't know if I butchered her name, but she talked about 2 SPED children, a nephew with the autism spectrum and another child's friend that has the anxiety. What I would like to see is, I would like to see, rather than 14 reductions of IAs, I think it needs to be hit with full-time teachers as well. I don't think it's fair to just target those who really don't have the voice for themselves. I think that you need to drill down, and I don't know if Tim is here tonight. I've looked around for him, but I haven't seen him. But I remember when he made his presentation and he talked about an average classroom size at the high school of 14. I think we need to take a harder look at the high school regular ed teachers, because I just don't think it's fair to drop all of this on the SPED, the IEP contingent. I think if there's going to be cuts, every student has to feel it, from the AP to the regular ed to the SPED. I think it's unfair to target them, and I'd ask you to consider that.
Absolutely, would consider that. And I would say, so as far as the instructional assistants, these would be IAs who are providing general support. So any student who is requiring one-on-one services or high level of services, that won't change. They will still receive the one-on-one or the high level of service as required in the IEP. Going back to my comments, we will not be out of compliance. Obviously, gentleman at the end of the table here, his job is to make sure we're in compliance. So, so I can say absolutely we will be in compliance. Ideally, again, we added a special education teacher at Newbury last year, for this current year, and are proposing in this budget a special ed teacher both at Pine Grove and Salisbury. Ideally, what I would love to do is wait a year before we start trimming IAs, as we're providing that additional licensed support personnel, and then adjust. I think we're in a situation now where we don't have that luxury. So to the discussion about the high school, we've certainly had lots of discussions. Class signups and enrollments are underway and done, and schedules are starting to be built in a number of sections. There are absolutely small sections. 7, 8, 9, 10, some AP classes. We take that away and we don't offer that AP. We take that away, we don't offer AP. I'm picking one: physics, chemistry, math, any of this English. Performing arts, there are low numbers there. We could remove those. We're not offering those programs. So what we tried to steer away from was, when you say try to hit as broad a brush as possible, down below you have the cut for elementary instrumental. We were there, and I pulled back because at the end of the day, that is the entirety, with really one full-time and a 0.2 from other 3 teachers. That's the entirety of the elementary instrumental program. So with that cut, we really decimate instrumental instruction for grades 4 through 6 in its entirety. So you're absolutely right. We could look to the high school, and we've already identified those areas, but it would be programs and offerings that would entirely disappear. And they're programs that are being asked for. And there are some programs, obviously the core, they don't get a choice of which they sign up for, so the core classes. But all those other classes in business, in the arts, they're important. There are kids taking advanced placement classes and getting credits and college credit and moving on to majors in the performing arts and majors in business and majors in high tech. And it's important that we're supporting that. So unequivocally looked at, but if we go there, we're wiping out entirety of programs and offerings.
I mean, Ryan, I get the AP thing. I mean, my oldest daughter ended up going into her college as a sophomore because of the AP stuff. So I get it. But I just think this is about fairness. It's about fairness to everyone. And I think if anybody's going to feel the pinch, I think every student needs to feel it, and not just the targeted group. So I have one other quick question. Was CPAC at all consulted? Because you said that this, for months and months, you've really been drilling down on the IAs. Were they brought into the loop on this?
The CPAC is currently not active at the moment because the chairperson and the vice stepped down. So I'm actually meeting with somebody next Thursday to take over that role. But it's very difficult to find parents who want to. But that's hopefully needs to be reinstated. So.
I just wanted to sort of go off what Paul said, but I don't want to see instructional assistants cut either. But I think that we've heard repeatedly from parents. I have a bunch of emails that have come in. It's just to keep class sizes small, and if you have to look to cut staff in a classroom, I guess unfortunately the first place you would go would be the instructional assistants and not the teacher, the classroom teacher, to try to keep the class size at a manageable level. We heard from teachers at the public hearing about how difficult that would make their job. I mean, certainly their job will be difficult with no instructional assistants, but if they have 20 kids in a class as opposed to 30, it certainly would be an easier manage than without. So.
Any other comments from the committee? I'd just like to make my comments. I think it's fair to say that none of us like any of the cuts that are on this list. I mean, no one wants to cut these, but we're in a situation that we have to make some hard decisions. I look at the number that's here, and it is a big number. $664,000 is a big number. My concern is Salisbury. We are putting Salisbury, I believe, in a very, very difficult position with this level of cuts. We heard what Neil Harrington said earlier tonight. I worry that in taking cuts, but trying not to take much deeper cuts, that we are potentially putting public safety and things like that also affect the students in our district at risk in Salisbury. Neil didn't say that in his presentation. I don't want to put words into his mouth, but I want to keep that in mind here too, that that as the less we cut, the more damage we could potentially be doing to these towns. Do we want to have Brian go through the bottom box? Anybody?
Could I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So I think I know the answer, Brian, but the reason we assume 175 from the state and not 285 or 300 is because even though what you said about making sure it's sort of a placeholder, at some point you realize that we're talking about the state. Mm-hmm. I'll believe it when I see it. Mm-hmm. And you could throw 500,000 in there, but that's just magic money, and it's most likely not going to happen. But what was the methodology used to arrive at that number? Because, again, circling back to what Narissa just said, if you got that 665 down to 500,000, well, then the numbers that translate to what we would be looking at might be a little more in the range of what we heard that Salisbury said they could afford, which was a 4% as opposed to a 5.68% increase.
Just as perspective, just so to give you an idea, the rationale behind the 175 is assuming 85% for regional transportation, which there seems to be Momentum, somewhere between 85 and 100, and an additional $10 per pupil fine in Chapter 70. So those are round numbers at this point, rounded to 175. By way of perspective, to get to 450,000, we had actually done a calculation. This whole sheet gets Salisbury to just above 450,000. So you have to do top and bottom, or some semblance thereof. It's roughly $1.1 million. Get Salisbury to a touch above 450, 453, 452,000.
And then I would just then add that the answer to your question is because the reason we can't get to that is because that is a catastrophe. That is a catastrophe budget that the towns are asking us for. We cannot approve a catastrophe budget. We can't. So that's the answer to the question.
I agree. I also know that we need an approval.
Say again?
I said, I agree. I just also know that we need an approval. I mean, this comes down to we need another town to approve this budget, or we will be on a month-to-month budget.
Can I add one last thing? And I'm going to be hung, but I'm going to say it anyway. As I stated already, Triton has voted to potentially use our whole E&D fund. And according to the DOR, when I printed this out, Salisbury has $1.3 million in their free cash. And like I said, Raleigh has little over $2 million. We've dipped into our E&D, or our equivalent of free cash. Maybe town officials need to look at that. And maybe the voters, if you want to see a budget that can still educate your children, maybe you need to talk to your selectmen again.
Can I just pause and just talk process to make sure we're all on the same page? The Salisbury Board of Selectmen voted Monday evening, right, Neil, to schedule a town meeting for Saturday, June 30th at 10 a.m. That is, there's a weird 45-day intersection. The regional law requires the towns to reply and respond to this, your vote, if you take a vote tonight, within 45 days. The Salisbury Town Charter actually requires that the selectmen post a meeting for a special town meeting for 45 days. So not related at all, just happens to both be around 45 days. So vote on Monday night, posted tomorrow, 45 days out. The soonest a Salisbury meeting, a special town meeting could be held was Saturday, June 30th. Rowley, I don't know if Rowley's taken action. I don't know what the Rowley bylaws are, but so from tonight, technically, you had 30 days from Monday night, which was the final vote. Salisbury voted a lower number, which was a no, which is recorded as a no vote. So that's the official failing of the FY19 budget. You have 30 days to pass a budget. Obviously, we made sure we were ready to go. 2 days later, here you are tonight, have the ability to approve a budget. We'll certify that. The clock starts tonight on a vote from the committee that within 45 days, the towns have to, the way I interpret the law, the Chapter 71, Section 16B talks about the amount we certify, that the town needs to take action on that certified amount. The appropriating body in a town has to take action on that amount. So within 45 days, if the town holds a town meeting, obviously we know Salisbury is scheduled for the 30th. We'll see what Rowley does. Then there could be a yes and no vote. If the town does not hold a town meeting in that 45 days per statute, that is recorded as a yes vote. The town of Newbury passed both town meeting and the ballot, the override. So there is one of 3 votes needed to have an approved budget. So if one of the 2 towns, by either holding a town meeting, Rowley and Salisbury, by either holding a town meeting or by not holding a town meeting at all, says yes, either one, then we have an approved budget and we move forward with that. That certainly, to Narissa's point, that leaves the 3rd town, regardless of which town it is, Newbury or Rowley or Salisbury, leaves them with a big bill to pay, and not necessarily a plan to do so. But I just wanted to make sure that everyone was understanding the way statute dictates. That's not regional agreement. Obviously, we have language in our regional agreement, but that's statute. That is Chapter 7116B. So.
Do we, there is a second page to this that deals with assessments. Do we want to have Brian or Michelle go through this at all, or do you want to?
Ask a question?
Yeah.
Can we consider the not recommended reductions?
I was assuming I was going to explain those next.
Oh, okay, all right.
I don't know, I asked and nobody seemed interested, but Monique is now interested, so if we could.
I would at least like to explain them to you and why they're not recommended. So we've talked about, and again, looking purely at a numbers exercise, again, looking at class sizes across the entirety of the district. At the secondary level, to address class size, it takes away offerings and programs. Similar with the middle school schedule. At the elementary school, it comes down to pure self-contained class sizes. So grade 2 at NES would actually go from 3 sections to 2 sections if we made one reduction. So that would take current sections of 15, 15, 16, which agreed is small, but again, if you divide that by 2, that then becomes 23 and 23. Similarly, at Salisbury, it's actually 4 sections, 17, 17, 17, 18. If we divide that same total by the same 69 students by 3, you have 3 sections of 23. So even though grade 2 at NES is 46 and 69 at Salisbury, when you cut a section out of each, they both land at 23. Again, on paper, not way above target. But again, looking at the overall impact, if we were talking about grade 4 and 5, there wouldn't even be a hesitation. But given the fact that we're talking about grade 2, and we haven't talked about move-ins, we haven't talked about any amount of students that would come in between now and the end of the year or in moving in over the summer, that's a scary number to begin the summer with. As far as technology support, in the final budget, we already reduced a half-time data specialist, so we currently have a director of technology, we have a systems administrator, 2 technicians, and 1 data support specialist. In the final budget, we cut both the payroll clerk and in the district office and the data support specialist, both of those by a half. And so what it worked out is we actually have the person who was the unfulfilled payroll clerk, the data support specialist is now filling both of the halftime roles. So we've already taken a halftime hit in the technology department. We could take another person that would go from 5 individuals to 3.5 individuals. I don't know the exact PC and Chromebook count right now, but it's a lot, and they're depended on more and more. And it's smart boards, it's projectors, it's not just a desktop anymore. So we could use 5 more people, let alone giving up 1. So looking to minimize impact, that's certainly someplace we would have to look. I can't in good conscience recommend that because it would be a significant impact. I think we talked briefly about elementary instrumental. Again, the thinking would be that what is currently occurring during the day, it would have to occur after school, so we would lose 1 teacher and go to a fee-based structure. It would have to be a significantly higher fee-based structure, something to the tune of $250, $300 per year, which, if we were talking about private lessons, not a bad rate, but we're not. We're talking about giving kids an opportunity to explore music and instrumental music as part of their free and appropriate public education. So as I believe there's certainly many sides to this. I believe this would decimate the instrumental program at the elementary level, which becomes the feeder program to the middle school, which becomes the feeder program to the high school, which produces lifelong performing artists. In the final budget, we proposed an additional spending of $50,000. We have spent a lot of time on school safety. I don't think we need to talk at length about the fact that it is the thing we talk about now. It is the one, not one thing, I wish it was just one thing. It is one of the many things that keeps me up at night. This $50,000 would install in the vicinity of 50 cameras, surveillance cameras around the schools in the spots where we can't always see. It's a scary world. We need to be more secure. And without bodies, without people to be present in all aspects of the building, in all areas of the building, we need the ability to have surveillance cameras to see those locations. Professional development speaks for itself. We have one line in the district budget, $20,000. That's PD for the entire district. We could cut it. You know the answer there. $62,646, that is a 2% COLA for all non-union employees, so that's any administrator or administrative support staff, any administrators in any schools, any school offices, and the entire district office staff. Again, could be taken away. I have a hard time not giving all the support staff an equivalent raise when the rest of the associations are receiving a COLA. And then at the high school level, we talked about this. Could it work? Absolutely. Cut $50,000 out of the substitutes at the high school, and when the teacher's not here, we hold a study hall down in the cafeteria. It could be done. It is done. You lose significant instructional time. We have there are, people say, well, it's a substitute. They're not learning anything anyway. I would argue that that's not the case. We have some substitutes who are highly trained and do instruct students when teachers are absent. So I think that's given up hope if we say that that's just going to be a placeholder for any time a teacher's absent. So again, all of them doable. All of them on the top are doable. The top, we have a workaround and feel like it is a wide-scale impact, and we can absorb and accommodate and work with the impact. At the bottom, I think the impacts are fairly significant and go beyond what I can, in good conscience, recommend to you, fully understanding the points that Narissa raised.
Any discussion on that? Dan?
So real quick, and I just in my head and on the paper here was adding up some of the cuts we had already made, adding to the roughly 665 that is in the yellow. So it's at least $1.5 million in cuts we've already made. And I'm really glad that you put this on paper, because no matter how we feel about all of this, what we're painfully aware of is that we're living in a democracy, and that the override lost in those two towns. And it's possible that in spite of how we feel about this, that we may have to fathom the cuts that are on the bottom part of the page as well, depending on what happens in the towns.
Can I ask?
If it doesn't pass. Correct?
I would defer that to Brian. I mean, my understanding is that if it does not pass, we go to a month-to-month last year. So not only are we losing this, we are losing all of the increase over last year. Is that correct, Brian?
Obviously, this has not been tested in the district. My understanding is we don't set a 1/12 budget. The commissioner sets a 1/12 budget. The commissioner can set it at 1/12 of the previous year, or he can make, I forget the statutory, a reasonable increase. I think that when you look at the increases that are left, $1 million is accounted for in the increase that remains for two special education teachers and out-of-district tuitions for students that we can't not pay. I mean, those are committed tuitions. So I would say that I think the commissioner has ample information to say that it's not just 1/12 of fiscal 18, that what remains as far as what we're actually increasing our spending for is reasonable. But I can't speak from experience. I certainly can't. But that's my understanding. And it wouldn't be on July 1, the commissioner magically appears. We would have to get some guidance and come back to you in January of the exact timeline of how that works. I believe we have to let the commissioner know, let DESI know that we don't have a budget. Actually, I feel like they ask, don't they ask? That anyone, well, Chris Lynch is gone, so everyone retired from the Department of Ed. So they used to ask and say, if there's anyone without a budget as we approach June 30th, please let us know. So we can certainly get more detail there. But yes, the assumption is that our assessment as of July would be 1/12 of our current fiscal 18 or amount relatively increased.
Did I answer your question, Dan?
Yeah.
Tina, did you have a follow-up? I just want to take in order.
Yeah, no, I had a quick question. I know one of the questions that I've gotten from other parents within the district, and I know this is a question that I've asked before, and we've discussed that obviously guerrilla-style fundraising and crowdsourcing is not a way to plan for future budgets, especially in working with the Triton Educational Foundation that I think does a good job, along with the PTAs. But say, I'm just going to use the camera installation, that's $50,000, because that's an easy number and that's a material cost. If we cut that and then an organization made it their mission to raise $50,000 so the cameras could be installed, is that something that you guys could accept as a district and still move forward with the install?
Absolutely. That is the only, on this list, that is the only one-time cost. So, absolutely.
Right. So for one-time costs, fundraising would make sense, but for the recurring costs, that's where it becomes a challenge. Because I've had parents ask me, why can't we just put together a crowd funding or, GoFundMe page and just raise the money? And that was the answer I was looking for. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Deb?
I understand. I too have looked at the Department of Revenue page, and I found it very interesting and somewhat surprising. And I understand that it's not prudent to use free cash to pay for this type of expense. I understand that. We know that, and we've been forced to do that. So I would ask, this is my optimistic hope, that the number may not be as low as Raleigh or Salisbury can easily or would like it to be. I think it's a substantial amount of money less than what we asked for even when we didn't have an adequate budget. So my request would be that, combined with the fact that the state is seeming to move forward, and maybe we can be optimistic that we won't be doing this for the next 20 years, with the state moving forward slightly, and with us, with the administration coming up with 600,000 plus more cuts, I would ask that perhaps Salisbury and Rowley consider using some of their free cash to help this year, and as a compromise, based on what you've seen for the 600 plus cuts, and that's my request. The state is moving forward. That hasn't happened. We have been expected to use our free cash, and we have. And I understand it's not your choice, but I ask if you could do that as a compromise to buy us another year.
Any other discussion? Sure, yeah. If we can keep it to under a minute, Neil? What do you think? 30 seconds, I love it.
The timer out, Deb. Salisbury started the year with $1.3 million in free cash. We now have $200,000 of free cash. Okay, we spent our free cash primarily on one-time expenditures and for capital items, and so we do not have $1.3 million in free cash. However, I'm impressed by the quality of discussion tonight, and I learned a lot of things. Under the circumstances, I would request two things. One, that you consider postponing a final vote until your next meeting, because you do have 30 days to take a vote. And then secondly, I would request a time to go back and ask the selectmen whether they would support putting an additional, calling for a special election for an additional override to be put before the Salisbury voters that would be less than the 800,000, but which might be able to bridge the gap between what we're talking about. Something to think about.
Thank you, Neil. And Larry, are you speaking for Rowley?
The budget for the upcoming year uses $250,000 in overlay. The stabilization, we're adding $50,000 to $1,092,090. And free cash, that's $2,022,917. We're using $865,000. Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I
Did you
allowed
have-
to ask Neil a question? So I'm just thinking logistics now. If a vote isn't taken tonight, then there's no resolution before July 1. If a vote is taken tonight, it could be adjusted on June 13th, but then we're still working within the 45-day window. And I appreciate what you were saying, and I think I 80% understand what you're suggesting, but I just worry about if we don't take a vote till June 13th, the committee doesn't take a vote till June 13th, then that delays that 45-day window basically until August 1st, if I'm doing rough math.
We just have to take a vote within the 45 days.
Correct, but now we're into the new fiscal year?
No, we still have our special meeting scheduled for June 30th.
But it would technically allow Rowley, and I'm saying Rowley would milk it all the way to the end, but it doesn't, the clock doesn't, actually, I take that back. You have to vote within 30 days. So we
Exactly.
have to vote within 30 days of Monday night.
Right.
So I think tonight they can take a vote, whether it's halfway there or all the way, whatever the number is, and it can be amended with, and move away with the full assumption that we know it can be amended, and then they can amend it on June 13th, but then it's at least working within that. We have an option to be done by July 1 and I don't have to call the commissioner and say, yeah, we're that district.
It's up to the committee, whichever way you choose. I'm just trying to buy a little time for all of us to be able to reach some middle ground here. And since the selectmen by statute are the only ones that can call for an election override, they have a meeting next Monday. I could propose certainly putting that on their agenda. I would have to speak to the chairman. At the very least, 2 weeks from Monday, they could consider that same vote as well. And I would be willing to do that. I think considering the closeness of the vote in Salisbury, even though it did fail, it was within 100 votes or so. And I suspect it was more to do with the magnitude of the override request than the sentiment for an override. So I don't know whether a smaller override would pass, but you're not talking about an $800,000 gap anymore. So I'm willing to try.
So I just want to make sure you don't.
Thank you.
So I just want to make sure you don't walk away without me saying thank you. I appreciate you coming to the table and thinking creatively. I think, and again, please tell me if you disagree, I think semantically, no, logistically, I think it makes sense to take a vote tonight so that we keep the clock ticking, and then you could hold a special, not a special time meeting, a special school committee meeting anytime, but right up on up through June 13th, that number can be amended, and we certainly can have discussions that we know where it's heading.
So following such a vote tonight, you'd have to send me the certified new budget.
Yep.
And then you could come back and amend the certified new budget to another certified new budget?
We could.
Okay.
And that technically resets the clock.
That's fine.
But at least we're...
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I'm only speaking for myself, not the selectmen, but I think we're kind of in the same ballpark here. We'd like to get a resolution. We'd like to be able to move forward, and we'll do what we can to help.
Can I ask one more question?
It's up to the chairperson.
Madam Chair. Am I allowed to ask him one more question?
Yes, I have
Thank
one
you.
for him too, apparently.
So to put you on the spot, if the number is the 665, so I'm sorry, 664, that puts your assessment, and again, we didn't get to the next page yet, but moving ahead, puts you at an increase of 627. Would that be the number?
And, in the last 5 years, we've put a substantial amount of our free cash every year to support the Triton budget. It isn't like we're holding back and not spending. We're spending $200,000 to $300,000 a year of our free cash on the Triton budget. So we've been able to support your budget. So this isn't something that we're just coming in here saying, oh, wait a minute, we don't want to use our free cash. We also have to look, when we plan, we're planning 1, 2, and 3 years ahead. If we use every bit of free cash this year and free cash comes in next year at a very low number, we probably won't be able to support the Triton budget because every year you people do come in with a budget that's larger than what the 2.5 Proposition 2.5 allows us to spend. So I would hope that you would vote a budget tonight, and that way the 3 boards, or the 2 boards anyway, can make their decisions and plan accordingly. But we need to have a town meeting before June 30th, and we need time to, post it, print the warrants, do all the paperwork and stuff. It isn't something you can just plan and do a week or 2 later. It'll take us 30 days, I imagine, to put a plan together, to have a town meeting on I think the last Monday in June. I'm not sure what that date is, so just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Dave, can you just stay up for just 1 second? I have a quick question for you. Just thinking logistically, since I also sit on the Pine Grove Renovation Committee, I don't know where that last Monday in June falls, but I know that we are literally closing Pine Grove toward the end of June. Brian, do you know what the dates are?
So the last Monday in June is June 25th.
Okay.
So as of June 26th at 5 p.m., W.T. Rich gets the keys. 2 p.m. Chris Nealon's back there saying 2 p.m. They're kicking him out early. And that literally, Chris Nealon, the principal, the whole office is moving over here for the summer, and W.T. Rich takes over that campus. So that Monday, it's the night.
I believe, like I said, we haven't made a decision yet, so I'm just.
That would be.
I'm just presupposing, but we definitely, as I understand it, and I assume I'm correct, that our free cash will expire. Wasn't expire, but we can't. Our ability to spend it ends June 30th, because then for anything next year, we have to do the new free cash certification. Yep. So that, obviously, like I say, we put a substantial amount into the regular budget every year. We try to do it for capital costs because obviously every year we put a lot of money in. A lot of our free cash goes to Triton. So it's just something that, whatever you're going to do, I would recommend that you do a budget tonight so that at least Rowley, and I assume Salisbury, if they know when the date is, can make plans.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion from the committee? Okay. Can I, Maureen?
I make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2019 final operating budget version 2 in the amount of $40,822,271, with assessments to Newbury in the amount of $9,080,843, to Rowley in the amount of $10,137,192, and to Salisbury in the amount of $11,678,611, with the remaining balance of $9,925,625 being funded by the state and local revenues.
Second.
Second from Dan. Any discussion? All in favor? Good, a unanimous vote.
One opposed.
Sorry, one opposed. Two opposed? Two opposed. So Sandy, we have Dina and Monique opposed.
And so I just have a question. So for clarity's sake, that reflects the $664,000 that you've identified tonight.
Correct.
The only thing I'd ask is that you keep open how you get to that number.
Yes. Well, I mean, we could talk more at the DCC next week. Obviously, there's no vehicle to have discussions with the committee. I mean, beyond tonight or a formal meeting, can't discuss that offline with, the full committee. So, yes, absolutely.
Okay. That will put us all the way back at the beginning of the agenda now. So, moving back to the consent agenda. And since I see a large departure, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming tonight. I know it was a long meeting, and I appreciate you bearing with us.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do.
Can I get I'd first like to call out the donation. There's a check in the amount of $10,000 from the Triton Educational Foundation to be used to purchase projectors for all district schools. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. All right. Sorry, we're skipping since we did a lot of this in between. I believe we're on section 9, new business. Does anyone have any new business to raise? All right. Reports and deliberations. District Communications Committee, we canceled the April meeting, and the next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, May 24th, 2018 at 6:30 in the high school library. School committee evaluation. The school committee evaluation process will, the evaluations are due at the June 13th, 2018 meeting, and we'll have a final report of the evaluation at the August meeting. I believe the superintendent will be sending out the Google Docs version of the individual evaluation reports. I don't know exactly what they're called.
He will be.
Yes, he will be. Excellent. All right. So if you can make sure, I'll try to send a reminder email, but if you can make sure that you have those back by the June meeting. An annual evaluation of the superintendent of schools. Would you like to?
Yes. So in your packet, sorry, I feel like I'm catching up all night here. Page 84. Nope, that's my report.
It was on the table.
It was on the table, that's right, it's not. It's Annex 11. It is not a numbered page. For those in the audience, there's copies of this if you would like it. It wasn't, we didn't make extra copies. We didn't think many people would be still here. So just to remind you, my evaluation process is obviously a public process. The documentation is public documentation. I submitted this to you Saturday. Again, sorry for not making the packet. There were a couple things going on. This is a shortened process because of the fact that my first year and a half, we decided we were going to try and get on a calendar year schedule. We tried it. Doesn't really work when I'm, it works long-term, it works, but it doesn't work for me to be on a different cycle from the committee and every other educator and administrator within the district. So we said, no, let's get back onto the regular schedule. So this is really a 4-month window. So the goals that I set, just to reiterate them, by June 30th, structures that provide direct or indirect impact on student learning will continue to be reviewed and adjusted, ensuring Triton students are provided with optimal conditions for their success. Level of progress by June 30th will vary depending on the specific action. Professional practice goal was to complete their requirements and competencies of year 2 of the NISIP program, taking full advantage of all opportunities for personal growth, including the programming, consultation with my assigned mentor, and the development of a network of support through my colleagues in other cities, towns, and districts. And then the district improvement goal, by June 30th, 2018, operational structures that provide a direct or indirect impact on our standing, perception, and viability as a school district will be reviewed and adjusted, improving our district through a more aligned and coherent plan for success. And then obviously the level by June, given it was a 4-month goal, will vary. So once we get back onto the regular process, we'll do this in September. The goals will be aligned to the district strategy, or my goals will be aligned to the district strategy. And then next year in June, this time when I'm providing information for you, I'll have artifacts and back on the normal process where you have that artifacts and documentation. So this year, because it's shorter, what I did is, so there's 3 actions under each goal. Under goal 1, it was the aligned middle school, high school schedule, special education review, and alignment of the K-12 student handbooks. Just briefly, we presented to you in March an aligned middle school, high school schedule. That's continued to tweak. For example, one of the things we talked about was a split period around lunch at the high school. That has actually been reworked and that no longer exists. The intervention at the middle school that we talked about has actually improved as far as the structure. So we continue to work on that. It's getting better, not worse. And I believe, again, the big The big change is the fact that we won't have teams at the high school, but I believe that the benefits that the schedule provides is going to far outweigh the impact of not having teams. Would I like to have teams? Unequivocally, yes. But as we continue to shrink, and with the projection, if we look at kindergarten and first grade numbers now, within 6-7 years, the middle school is 325 students. And so that changes the way we can affordably provide a structure. So we believe this schedule is actually future-proof as well, that allows us to adapt to the changing enrollment. Special education, we continue, and again, I don't want to go through all these in detail. You can certainly read the detail that I've written. That special education review, we continue to work on, have made great progress, but by September, are going to present to you a 3-year plan. What was thought to be, let's do a review, is turning into a very big process, and that's good, because it's about changing culture and expectations. And then the K-12 student handbooks, would love to hand them to you in June. It's going to be more like August. Kim Croto has gone through an extensive process, reviewing them, aligning them, working with the principals to make sure there's consistency. And then the next step is to make sure those go to our council for one final approval to make sure we have all the necessary policies in place. Next to each of the actions, all of the standards that are addressed in those actions are listed there. And what I didn't print for you, but I'll send you another copy. I believe you have copies. I'll send to you the actual full rubric so you have it in case there are questions as you complete this. Goal 2 was the actions were complete the NISIP program. Not going to talk about this at length. I've continued to do that. You've met my mentor. You've spent time with my mentor. I would say more importantly is the relationships I've built with my peers and other districts, and relying on other folks who have dealt with the same situation rather than me making the same mistake someone else has. Talking to other people, saying, what would you do? I've definitely changed my thinking in certain situations. I've changed other people's thinking in certain situations. So there's actually a really good core group of newer superintendents. That's my cohort, kind of from Concord, Carlisle through Tri-Town and Tewksbury in the area. So it's been a lot, but it's been a tremendous process. So next year, I move into year 3. So rather than having a full-time coach who's here routinely, I will not have a direct coach. It moves to a cohort model, so we'll meet 5 times throughout the year as like a critical friends group, taking problems of practice. And I go through this consultancy protocol. I describe it in the narrative here, using that type of setup, but it's run by one coach. So we do that 5 times, and then there's still 3 full days down in Marlboro. But the program has been very, very effective. The district improvement goal, the actions are to set up an annual report, making progress. It's a very different progress than I thought. As we've dug deeper into this, Ketty Lakey, who's our PR media specialist, has worked closely with me on this. The reality is it's really expensive to produce a decent-looking report. Now, as I get these reports from the other schools, whether private schools or those that begin with W, and I just see dollar signs, and now that we're looking at, we ran some very quick numbers of just, if it was 4 pages, 8.5 by 11, not even bound, color 2 sides, to mail it, to produce it and mail it, we're talking over $12,000. So we're kind of taking a different angle of how can we produce a digital annual report, but still find a way to get it out to all the towns, because again, this is in response from my listening tour, if you will, to all those folks. And I want to give Larry Gay credit from Newbury, who sat there at the table and said, look, I don't have students in the school, but I need to know what's going on. And that's an important message, that when we ask the communities to support our schools, case in point, what we're dealing with now, we need folks to be informed. We need folks to understand the amazing things that happen inside our walls and outside our walls. So I think that annual report, ultimately, I would love to produce something that is very professional, but I think right now is not the time that we have this cool, glitzy, glossy 20-page annual report when people are seeing that we're fighting about cutting critical support services. So looking for a very, very, very cost-effective way to do that now. School improvement plans and budgets and proposals. I feel like we did good with the school improvement plans. I would like to make the budget more aligned to the district strategy explicitly. I feel like we fought and argued for things that we identified in the strategy, but I would like the document to stand for itself and tell a story of, this is what we believe in, these are our priorities, and here's the money. So I don't think it does a bad job of that, but I would like to continue to develop that and tweak it more and align it more to the district strategy for improvement. And then the capital needs assessment. I feel like we've been talking about this long before Michelle existed, so I can't blame her. The reality is we continue to have the discussion with the DCC group, which became a landlord-tenant work group. We did some great work working with representatives from each of the town to identify how we can move to ensure that all 3 elementary schools are treated the same. Currently, we own Salisbury Elementary, the town owns Newbury and Pine Grove. That becomes a source of frustration when, in essence, the town of Rowley is paying for some major repairs at the Pine Grove School, but if it's at Salisbury, it's technically shared amongst the 3 towns. So the landlord-tenant working group, and it's the biggest changes for Salisbury, the Salisbury Selectmen agree that it makes sense as of fiscal 19 is the final debt payment. Once that's paid off, that debt is in our name, so we can't transfer title. But once we get to fiscal 20, the idea, and again, it hasn't been vetted fully through the DCC, and that would require a vote of selectmen and town meeting to amend the agreement, would transfer ownership of Salisbury back to Salisbury Elementary back to the town of Salisbury. Therefore, all 3 towns are the same, and then the regional campus is the one item or the one facility that we own. 375,000 square feet inside here, lots of space. The first thing we need to do is study the facility. You could spend $200,000 studying the entire site, the facility, the utilities. The number that Michelle and I have talked about is 75,000 is a comfortable number where we feel like we could do a very good facilities assessment where they study the building envelope, windows, roof, doors, as well as all the major systems, fit and finishes. So the issue is, how do we fund that? We keep talking about the best way is wait till we have an E&D balance. It's a one-time expenditure, and it sets us up. Even talked to Representative Kelcourse. He loves earmarks. I think it's safe to say that publicly, and he would say that if he were here. So we even talked to Representative James Kelcourse and said, here's a great spend, $75,000. It's a one-time, and it's a long-term impact because it allows us to finally plan strategically and long-term. So there are some needs that you don't see. There are some that you do see. We had maybe 5-6 years ago a water main break under the main entrance roadway, and now every year it just gets a little bit worse, a little bit more ripples and bumps as you're driving in. So, so we know there's some big money to spend over the coming decades, but we need to fully assess before we can plan accordingly. So that's a brief, sorry, probably not as brief as you'd like, update. So the form, again, you have to evaluate me. Paul's laughing. You have to evaluate me on my progress on my goals, which is the 3 goals overall. There's actions under each. And then you have to evaluate me on the rubric. Technically, what gets reported to the Department of Ed is, I don't even think progress on goals is reported to the Department of Ed. But I think if it is, it's the ratings on the 3 goals, and it's the ratings on the 4 standards. So generally the way we've done it is you have that in the back of the packet where you have each of the substandards, all the indicators. So in Standard 1, instructional leadership is curriculum, 1A, 1B, instruction, 1C, assessment, 1D, evaluation. But I obviously can't provide artifacts for every single indicator, so have aligned the goals in a way, and we'll tease this out even better and further next year, aligning the goals with the indicators so that you can make an assessment on the standards as well as the goals. Any questions?
Can I just make one comment?
Sure.
I think it's important that each school committee member meet with you to discuss these two.
I would love the opportunity to talk.
Especially since we're
With
supposed
school
to
committee
be
members.
putting, all of this should be based on the same information. So if we have questions, it's our only opportunity to really do that.
Yes, and if I can piggyback on that, literally very briefly. So the evaluation has to be based on a standard, the same set of information. So that's where it makes sense to align it around the goals. I'm always cognizant and working towards every single indicator and every single standard, but I have to focus my improvement on specific goals. So the process is the same when we evaluate teachers. They set goals, and that's what we're expecting that a teacher, an educator, an administrator is working towards. But I would absolutely love the opportunity to sit with each of you. So I think as far as timelines, this needs to come back to the June meeting, not calibrated, but consolidated. So if these go back to, do you want them through Patty to you,
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'm thinking the end of May. Is that it has to come back by the June meeting.
So if you have it
these
by
would
June
have
1?
to be.
June 1's a Friday. I'm
Yeah,
just thinking it's
yeah.
June 1's a Friday, so
Yep.
Friday, June 1st. Patty will have a packet, get that to you.
Perfect.
We have a form that I think I created that Dean has used in the past.
Yeah, I think I've.
Did she already give it to you?
I have Dina's master sheet. I've seen that
Okay.
before. So
So we need to make an appointment with you before June 1.
Yes.
Okay.
Good luck.
Dan?
And this will
I
be
know.
done electronically?
It will be done electronically, right? So similar to the school committee evaluations, it'll basically be a Google Doc that you'll be able to fill in online. When you submit it or save it, really, then I'll be able to access it and consolidate all of the evaluations into one master report.
Were you talking about mine or the school committee?
Yours. I
So you
believe
do
they're
want, I was going
both-
to say, do you want
yeah.
these in printed copy, or you would like to do it electronically?
I would like to do it electronically if we can. I thought that was the way we had done it in the past.
We have, absolutely.
Okay.
We can do it either. Obviously, we can print
Okay.
it and give it, or,
Both ways in the past.
yeah, I think we've done it both ways. So electronically?
Much easier to read if it's electronically speaking. from
I have
desks.
the worst handwriting, so.
Yes, I've seen some of your handwriting. Daniel?
My handwriting.
Okay, so I'll make sure that gets shared out, and then I will also make sure the school committee, there'll be a folder that everyone has a file in.
Okay.
Just so I'm clear, so school committee evaluation, is that also going to be June 1, or?
Yes. Yeah, we can make that all. Let's consolidate and make that all June 1. Yeah,
Also
that
to
makes
Patty.
sense. Uh-huh. I'm sorry.
Those going to you? They'll go directly to you?
They're going to be electronic.
So they're all, actually, so yes, I take that back. If you're not doing paper, then all you're going to do is complete the Google Doc,
By
and it
June
will
1,
be
and that's
automatically
right,
saved,
that's
and it's
right,
in the
she can
folder.
go- right, okay.
I will say, what we've talked about with the school committee evaluation, y'all can do whatever you want. This is your evaluation. This is a self-evaluation, which no other school committee does, by the way, so kudos. You talked about having the full year to evaluate the full year. So you don't have a timeline. We have a EPIMS reporting to the state by June 30th. There's a timeline that mine follows. When I had talked to Dina, as a previous chair, we had talked about, you could use the whole month of June. Talk about it, get the forms at the June 13th meeting, have them due by June 30th.
Okay.
Do by, I mean, you don't meet in July, have them due by July 15th. Could
Say
be,
June 30th, so
June
people
30th.
don't forget.
yes, summers happen.
Fresh in your mind.
Yeah. And then in the August meeting, review it. But again, you're reviewing your prior year's progress without having to report anything to the state. So you can work a time frame that works best for you.
Okay.
Can
So
I just
let's-
add, I was just going to, do we have to decide on that? Do we have to vote on that, or?
I think I can just set it.
I just would add that I like what
You-
the superintendent just suggested.
You already took a vote, couldn't tell you when, to suspend your policy because your policy was different. So you were supposed to be doing it in April and due for May.
Right.
So you already suspended that to say, let's
To June
play
30th.
this out for this year, make it longer. So I don't think a vote's needed tonight. Again, all you're breaking is your policy because this is something that a lot of school committees don't even take up. So the fact that you do a self-evaluation is a good thing.
Well, I'd just like to say that given that we are doing yours for June 1, we don't really know what's going to happen with the towns and the budget, that if we could do the school committee one by June 30th, that's, I think, would be doable. I don't know how others feel.
I was just looking for my calendar. I want to say the August meeting is the 22nd or something like that. I've somehow lost it.
It's August 22nd.
The many pages of my packet. Okay. So let's say the school committee evaluation then, the forms will be from the June 13th meeting due June 30th with the evaluation at the August 22nd, we just said? August 22nd meeting. And the superintendent, meetings with him by June 1st, have it submitted on June 1st, and we'll go through it at the June meeting.
So to that end, because we're doing this electronically,
Mhm.
I am not going to share the school committee documents with you yet.
Okay.
Because then you're going to have two that don't look entirely different, kind of grids and tables. Deal with mine, share them at the June 13th meeting, then you have from June 13th to June 30th to fill them out. Does that make sense? Then you only have one of those in your inbox that we're all still trying to wrap our heads around Google.
Okay.
Let me see if I can get this straight. Brian's evaluation is due June 1st. Brian's evaluation is due June 1st. We're going to do it electronically. We have to meet with him personally before that time. It was very confusing to me. Then, we have to have our school committee evaluation on ourselves done by June 30th, but we will get the document June 13th? Okay, so we'll have 2 weeks?
Yeah.
And we have 2 weeks. Okay.
So we'll basically conclude the superintendent's process, immediately open, at the June 13th meeting, we'll conclude the superintendent's process, open the school committee evaluation process, and do the same thing all over again.
And I can very easily share with you when you say you want it. So there's no laws here that you're breaking. So if you submit my evaluation, I won't know it's in a folder, so it's just another file that you added to. But if you say, hey, I'm done with yours, ready for the school committee, let me know and I'll go in and just share the file. Because what I've done is created nine Google Docs, and it's just, I can see it, Patty can see it, and you can see it, and the chair can see it. And actually, I think everyone can see it. I think we just shared them all. So you go into yours, fill it out. So if you want, let me know when you're ready for it. If it's ahead of the 15th, as a general rule, I won't share you won't end up with that in your inbox as a shared document until June 13th, unless you contact me. This has gotten very confusing.
Is everyone ready to move on to the monthly report of the superintendent of schools? Yes, okay.
I promise brief. End of year events, you have them on the page here. Again, to confirm, the graduation tour is happening again, Thursday, May 31st. Hoping it's as big as a hit as it was last year. Extra help, we had a big discussion about extra help and how that is posted for teachers. That was a big discussion with the last teacher's contract negotiations. They're required to have posted electronically where, they're required to post which day of the week they are available on a weekly basis to provide extra help. And additionally, they need to required to list homework online. Trying to find an easy way to get this information out so that parents can look that information up. It's in Aspen, it's Google, it's on a board, it's here, there. So we actually created a document that posts to the website, if you follow those two links in my report. I will say our website's having some problems right now. It started when Brett linked this document up, so maybe it's my fault. But that is posted online, so if I have a child at the high school, they have 6 teachers, I can go in, look them up by last name, and I know Mrs. So-and-so is here on Tuesdays at 2:15, Mr. So-and-so is here every morning at 7 a.m. So every student knows when the teacher is available for extra support. So that's a good thing. I'm glad we've arrived there. It was a great way to keep that information fresh and out there. Just to let you know, we are exploring other options for the website. We are out of ADA compliance. We, 4 years ago, we built a website, paid one time for it, and pay a small fee to just host it. If you divide it by the 4 years we've had it, we paid about the amount we would if we were just hosting it anyway. But the reality is there's new technologies, there's ADA compliance that we're now behind the times, so we want to move back to a model where we pay $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year, and it's a content management system that's easy to use, easy for people to access. So we're exploring that. Middle school, high school alliance schedule, I believe I covered that. Vaping forum, 2 weeks from tonight? No, next Wednesday night. Diane Knight, who is an RN, did a forum, I believe, in Newburyport. She's doing it the next night in Pentucket. I think they're copying us. But this is what we ended up talking about. Anyone who was here for the opioid forum, it quickly devolved into a discussion about vaping. That's not to say the opioid crisis isn't a real crisis, but this is something that we know kids are dealing with. Kids who don't want to deal with it are frustrated by it every day. It's hard to track, it's hard to see, and the information that you will hear about how these companies are targeting, they're not catering to, they're targeting kids. Packaging this stuff you can buy online, even if it's just nicotine, it looks like candy. And so then you're buying stuff online and you have no clue what's in it. And so kids think, it's vapor, right? It's the same thing as a humidifier in my room. It's not. And so I think most public health officials agree that this is going to be the thing that we're learning about in a decade about how bad the impacts of vaping are. So really important forum. Dianite, who's an RN, our nurses, I know a lot of them will be here. Various school staff, police from all 3 towns, our SRO will all be here. So it's a presentation and then a Q&A, because as someone said, we don't need to do this with parents. We need to be teaching students. My argument is, no, we first need parents to understand. 4 weeks ago, someone showed me a vape, and I was like, it's a little tiny USB drive. No, that's a vape. So it's... Paul's done. That was a little drop the mic. Good accent and emphasis. So this is something that we need parents to be in the know so they can help us. When we're saying this is real, they get it. And this needs to be everyone wraps around these kids to help them understand how dangerous this is. Pine Grove Project, you have a couple fun pictures there. It's always fun to see an excavator inside a building. And then Dina mentioned the 40 asset presentation. It's technically ECAB. It's the Essex County Asset Builder Network. Tina Lose, who did come, she was here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I can't keep track of who was where. She did make a presentation to you several months back. And as Dina said, I would say what makes it so powerful, I actually had a conflict that night. It was elsewhere. But I was able to watch I watched the Georgetown, and it's Amesbury's is next week, I believe. I'm going to try and get to theirs, because it's actually joint students. It's students from all our communities making the presentation in each of the towns. And I think Tina's doing some pretty neat work in empowering kids, because at the end of the day, we can beat our heads against a wall and preach and yell and scream and warn and threaten. Doesn't matter. If kids aren't invested in buying in, it doesn't matter. So we know from recent events that kids have a voice, and when they use it well, it makes change. So some really neat work. I'm hoping we figure out a way, because there aren't a lot of resources other than it's paid for through a tower grant. So she's hired for 3 years, and the hope is to build support within the towns. And obviously, she's partnered with Newburyport, where they have a youth program and city services. We don't have that in our town. So we're trying to find who it is that can become that support. So this work continues. So any questions, please ask.
Can I ask a quick question? Are we doing the same thing we did last year with the high school graduates walking through
Yes.
the elementary schools?
Thursday, March 31st. That is the May 31st, sorry. Still stuck in March. Yes, the last sentence there. So we're calling it the tour. That's the graduate tour. Thursday, May 31st.
All 3 elementary schools?
All 3, yep. So I want to say they are leaving here right after practice. Is it 9 o'clock? 9:30. They expect to be over at the elementaries before 10, and I believe have to be out of there by 11:45, and then they're heading into Boston.
Red Sox game.
I'm sure.
I don't know, I can't keep
It's something
it straight.
fun.
Every
So it's
day it's like,
practice,
I have no money.
then a fun tour, and then I know they're going to Boston. I don't know if it's a Duck tour or Red Sox game, but yes, May 31st. Mark your calendars. Bring the tissues. Lots of tears. And the teachers, too. So any other questions?
Can I ask a quick question about the vaping? Has this been given to the students?
The forum, it has not
Or
yet. Nope.
is there a plan to?
Absolutely. I think, sure, Kim's making a face over there. This is part of an overall wellness discussion. So this is one of the many things we have to figure out how to not just have a one-time forum. I think with parents, we can give them information in a one-night setting that I'm guessing will be a few hours of discussion, and we'll walk away well-educated. That's not how you scare kids enough to believe. So I think this needs to be part of a more formal education. We're still trying to figure that out. Obviously, we haven't added any teachers, but where we can add it into PE, especially at the high school, I will go on record saying that that's where I see this as a viable
Can I add the middle
opportunity.
school? Because having a middle schooler myself, I know that vaping is a very big
Absolutely.
issue in the middle school right now.
Absolutely.
It's actually in the substance abuse prevention program that started this year at the middle school. So it does,
The life
so it is
skills?
in there right now through a curriculum, through the PD instruction. So.
Yeah, and I would say that the middle school schedule actually allows it. Again, you have to have someone whose responsibility is to teach it, but with that aligned schedule, with that rotating 7-day schedule, it actually allows for those things to be filled in. Electives and those one-off classes that we previously didn't have the structure to put in. So yeah, so it is, and there are 14? 14 lessons at the middle school?
14, and the high school already has some components of it, but they're expanding next year into using that same curriculum that we're using for the substance abuse. But we still need a sex education teacher in class, so that's my next platform next year. So.
But I mean, I want to make sure I say, if parents say it's a problem, it is unequivocally a problem. It's a problem in our schools. We have not figured this out. I don't want to make anyone think that we're like, oh, no, it doesn't happen, it's all good. When parents say it's a problem, it's absolutely a problem. When you can't smell it and you can blow it into your shirt and not see it, that makes it really difficult to track. So I think teachers, like me, have learned a lot in recent months. So certainly we're doing our best. There's actually a company that shared with technology. Someone shared it with me. It's actually a vapor sensor, and it can actually sense vapor in bathrooms. I don't know how it does it, but of course I'm sure it's not cheap. So there's certainly things we need to do to figure out how to tackle this, but it's about lots of eyes watching lots of kids. You know, when we have fewer adult eyes, it's really hard. It's really hard.
Brian, I have a question. Are the drug sniffing dogs onto it?
If it's a drug, absolutely. A drug is a drug. So, you know, if it's THC and it's in a liquid form or a raw form, absolutely. If it's not, if it's nicotine, if it's just kids think, oh, it's just flavored, it's all good. Who knows the chemicals? And they're buying this stuff online and it's coming from who knows where. So if it's a drug, absolutely. But it's not just the concern about the drugs. Absolutely.
Can I just get a quick clarification? On the vaping forum, it says families, but I've heard you say parents. Is this a family event?
Oh, absolutely.
Or is
Yeah.
it, okay.
Yep. Certainly, I mean, it's not, certainly, I think that if the kindergartners are sitting there, welcome. I don't think they would be as entertained, but I would hope I would love to see parents and high schoolers sitting there side by side, probably being held in place, but whatever it takes. We have high schoolers, I get it. Yes. Yeah. Good point.
And I just want to make a comment. So I know Dina had talked about the Essex County Asset Building Network presentation, and I was there as well for a good part of it. I thought it was fantastic, but one of the things that was really neat to see, I thought, was the representatives from our 3 police departments were there, and the students actually held up at one point as everything you wanted to be when you were a kid. Everybody wanted to be a firefighter, and all the policemen were over there like, come on. So it was really good natured, and it's just nice to see that continued, I guess, camaraderie that the police are building, or public safety officials in general are building with our student body, because I think that's really important. So. All right, subcommittee reports and action items, policy and advocacy, Linda?
Okay, the policy, we are reviewing the policy manual with MASC. We've had to take a step back so that some of the policies can be reviewed by the administration. We're going to pick it up again in June, but I don't think we're going to be going on to other sections because I think some other sections need to be reviewed more deeply. So our next meeting is June 13th, I believe.
19th?
Oh, June 19th. Is it June 19th?
Oh, that's what it says in
Sorry.
You're coming to my sub.
June 19th. And that's it.
Okay.
Can I just confirm? So originally, it was estimated and suggested that this is a 2 to 3 year process. So we're at J, and again, I don't think it's a bad thing we're pausing because J is a very dense policy. But there's only 2 more sections after that. So we've made tremendous progress, but we do continue to make progress. And then hopefully then by next year, we can have the whole manual online and then don't have to deal with this, which policy is updated, which isn't. This is a good thing.
Finance Subcommittee, so we meet May 23rd. I don't think we've been going through the budget, obviously, here, so I don't think we have a whole lot to add to that. But I think this is the point where you would suggested that I put in the information on the state. Yeah. So there are 2 big things that are happening or have just happened. One of them was Senate Bill 2506, which is now Senate Bill 2525 because they have to change them every time they do a formal amendment, apparently. That is the Foundation Budget Review Commission bill, which I think hopefully you're all aware of because I know MASC has been promoting it quite heavily. That, to clarify, because this question has come up a lot, it is an agreement as to how to come about funding the recommendations. It is not funding itself. So the Senate unanimously approved it. It is now moving on to the House. If the House approves it, it will go on to the governor. It does not necessarily mean that there is funding coming our way. It's putting the process in place to set up the funding mechanism and the funding implementation, just to be clear on that. There were 2 regional school district amendments that were made to that. I believe there was only 1 amendment overall for that bill that was accepted. Both of the regional schools ones were withdrawn because they were almost immediately put in as amendments on the Senate budget process rather than amending that specific bill. So that bill went through pretty much cleanly. I think the only thing that was added to it was that the Foundation Budget Review Commission has to meet and re-review every 5 years, which is, I think that's a good thing. The Senate budget was also released last week. Budget amendments were filed. The base budget had a number of really positive things in it for us. The regional school district foundation budget, which is basically says we need a commission that's made up of a certain number of members from different groups that's going to sit down and look at how regional school districts are funded, the calculations that sit behind it, the way they're governed, that type of thing, as the way it's put down in statute. That is actually in the Senate budget as it came out of Ways and Means, which is terrific because unless they amend it out, that's going to go on through. Then the discussion will be with the House as to whether that gets to stay into what goes on to the governor. That also included 75% circuit breaker reimbursement, which is terrific. That's higher than the House final. So that is another one that could be dueled out in the House-Senate consolidation. We have a number of amendments that, by and large, have been filed by Senator Tarr. He has been just a tremendous advocate, and his office has been great with the communication. What we need to do at this point is to try and get co-sponsors onto these amendments to help get them pushed into the Senate budget itself when that comes to the floor on the 22nd. The amendments are 161 and 242 for regional transportation. 159 would bring minimum per pupil aid up to $100 per pupil. 246 is an interesting one. It's an unfunded mandate task force, and as we all know, unfunded mandates definitely, well, they don't necessarily affect our dollar value. They're just lumping more and more burden onto the district with the current dollars that we have. And then number 312 is a regional transportation study discussing how, or to look at how regional school districts, VOTECs, out-of-district special education, and regional transportation authorities could work together to hopefully find some efficiencies and save money, or per the state auditor's report, possibly look at doing bidding processes together and things like that to help increase the amount of competition that we would see through the bidding process. So the date for that is May 22nd. Again, the goal is to just get as many co-sponsors on there as we can. Senator Tarr and Senator O'Connor-Ives are obviously our two senators locally, but if you have friends, family, community members, otherwise that fall into other senators' districts, please ask them to give their senators a call, because the more senators that we have that are invested in these and realize that these are priorities for us, the more likely it is that we're going to see some of those come through in the Senate budget debate. And Dina, personnel and negotiations?
We were supposed to meet last week, but given the fact that the administration was focusing on the budget, we felt that was a priority. So we will be meeting on June 13th to continue to review our job descriptions. Next meeting is June 13th.
And I believe we have no written correspondence from what I saw in the packet. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Monique, you want to leave? Yeah. Okay. It's a unanimous vote. Thank you.